Good Sunday morning, good Saturday morning, everybody. I'm Danilo Evangelista. Kind of got Saturday and Sunday confused. But anyway, enough with that. Welcome to our Hurricane Outlook and Discussion. Decided to bring back the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion branding because why not? I like it better, honestly. Today, Saturday, November 4th, 2023, finally made it to the weekend after a very long week for probably many. And of course, we're also past Halloween and soon gonna get to Thanksgiving. So holiday season is here or getting here, at least depending on who you follow on social media, if you know what I mean. But holiday season almost here, as well as when that comes, when now that we're in that time of year, that also means hurricane season is beginning to wrap up today. So we're not really going to do much in terms of tracking today, more as more as much as just looking at general climate patterns that at least we would look for in the off season. A nice and very relaxed day today. Obviously, if you cannot already tell. I'm glad to have you along though. Let's get started with the NHC homepage. Not a lot going on, as I said. Obviously, it is November, and of course, we still have Invest 97L in the Southern Caribbean. This kind of does not seem like it's going to really do much of anything anymore. Really, it's just a 20% chance of formation within the next 48 hours and 7 days. If you remember, going back to several days ago, we had up to a high chance, I think, of this forming and doing something in the Caribbean, but things just didn't really come together. It did have a favorable upper atmospheric pattern, as well as obviously very, very warm sea surface temperatures in this region, and I'll actually go over that in just a little bit. We'll look at the sea surface temperature anomalies for the Atlantic, but bottom line, this didn't form, and obviously, because it is November, doesn't really seem like anything else or much of anything else is going to form right now. So definitely we are heading towards the end of the season. Eastern Pacific though, we got tropical storm Pilar, 45 miles an hour. Is it Pilar or Pillar? I think it's Pilar, so I'm gonna say Pilar. 45 miles an hour. Minimum central pressure of 1,002 millibars, and it is located at 10.2 north and 109.1 west. Going to move westward away from the coast of Mexico, and even here in the Eastern Pacific after Pilar, it doesn't really seem like much of anything else is going to happen. And really quickly, why not? Let's just take a look at the cone. Going to die out as well in a few days, so really beyond early next week, nothing to worry about with Pilar. I mean, nothing to worry about anyway, because it's already going to be moving off and away from the coastline, away from any sort of land threats. So that is something good with Pilar. NHC says that it will turn into a remnant low by 6 p.m. Pacific time, I believe, Monday night. So definitely something to look forward to with then. And then after that, of course, Pilar are going to move off and not really do, or I guess not really become much of any more of a concern. So anyway, enough with that. Take a look at a satellite image of the Atlantic. You could see, and you could definitely notice how we're now beginning to get into the off-season sort of pattern, because notice one thing, lots of dry air out here in the eastern Atlantic. You see a bunch of these low-level kind of spotty clouds, means there's a lot of mid-level dry air. Definitely not that much of a hurricane season pattern that you would see. This is a lot more of something that you would see with the off-season. And also, by the way, another very strong exotropical system right here in the far northern Atlantic, I believe, bringing some very gusty winds and heavy rains, I believe, to northern Europe. So that is that, and that's something I do know of. But even here, you notice we're beginning to see a lot of these very strong upper level winds, and you could see that by just the way the clouds are moving, especially in the upper levels. You see a bunch of this fast easterly movement, so that means there's a lot of westerly shear or shear coming from the west. A lot of strong upper level winds coming from the west, which means very strong wind shear, and that is also something that we typically see once the off season onsets. So definitely we're beginning to see that transition away from hurricane season. We also see, not very organized tropical waves out here. And hey, look, this is 97L. Kind of, as you could already tell, buried into Central America. So obviously, a sign that really nothing will come out of this. And I mean, we already had most of our activity for this season. We're kind of getting into November. And obviously, we're still in hurricane season. It still does not end till the end of the month. But usually, not always do we get November activity. So it wouldn't be shocking, in the very least, if we do indeed end up going the rest of the month without anything developing in the Atlantic. Though, obviously, wouldn't rule out. And hey, you could also see Pilar in the kind of far, or is that Pilar? I think it is, but this is probably Pilar in the far left frame, kind of getting cut off by the end of the frame, at least for this satellite shot, and that is Pilar once again going to move off to the west away from any land. And as I did mention before, things didn't really come together for 97L, but it definitely did have a very warm Caribbean, and not even just the Caribbean, but taking a look at the Atlantic as a whole. Sea surface temperature anomalies. This is updated as of yesterday from the NOAA Coral Reef Watch. And you could definitely tell Atlantic is still very much above normal, especially in the eastern Atlantic. This area has been very warm for the entire year. Basically since early spring, this area warmed up dramatically, and it's been very warm, at times record warm there since then. And it will really be interesting, especially as we're heading towards the off season, to see how this kind of evolves over the winter, and also how this evolves, El Nino. And we're actually going to be talking about El Nino more in depth today, but really quickly, Eastern Pacific, notice we have a lot of these red anomalies, very much indicative we are still in a strong El Nino. And these two factors, both of them El Nino, basically the warmth and the sea surface temperature anomalies along the equatorial Pacific, ENSO, as we kind of like to call it as a broader term. We're in the El Nino phase, the warm phase. That's what we call the warm phase, El Nino. And then the cooler phase, if all of these anomalies instead were all these blue shades that you see around here, that would be La Nina. And that would be interesting to see. It would really be interesting to see how this would play out for next year, whether this El Nino sticks or this goes away and maybe we transition back into a La Nina. And that would really be interesting to watch, especially with how it correlates with if this warmth sticks around in the Atlantic, especially to the degree we're seeing it right now in the Atlantic and even the Caribbean. If it sticks throughout the winter and persists at least to some degree into next year, those will be two very important things that we're going to be watching throughout the off season, and of course as we head into next year. This is the Nino 3.4 index, so basically this is the average value of what it is out here, the sea surface temperature anomalies out here over the equatorial Pacific, basically averaged into an index that we kind of look at. The current value 1.3 degrees Celsius above normal, so positive 1.3 degrees Celsius, meaning warmer phase, and that definitely means El Nino for sure. El Nino definitely holding on, been in a very positive and steady state basically since August, so we're definitely in an El Nino in the Pacific. Obviously didn't translate as much into the Atlantic this year, especially given how active we were, despite what a decent El Nino we did have. But certainly El Nino is there, and maybe we'll see more of effects of that throughout the winter. And speaking of El Nino, shorter term, definitely going to have huge implications in how the winter pattern sets up, especially for snow lovers in the east. And you know how I feel about that. We definitely need the snow in the east, and El Nino, at least according to some, definitely does help out with that. So maybe something to look forward to there. I also have here, if you're wondering what this is, ENSO. This is the CPC, the current status and predictions from the Climate Prediction Center with ENSO, and they kind of release these on a weekly basis every Monday, October 30th. That was this past Monday, and they'll probably release one on November 6th. This next coming Monday, and they'll have an update on ENSO and how everything is doing then. And with that, they also have weekly anomalies, weekly departures for all ENSO regions. And actually, I should have gone over this today. I don't know why I forgot about it, but I'll go over it at another time. All the regions of the ENSO, so basically all the regions that are broken up along the equatorial Pacific, because we actually have specific areas in which we watch closely in the Pacific for different portions of the ENSO. And of course, the one that is most important to us, at least when it comes to determining El Nino and La Nina, is the Nino 3.4. And you can see that actually, actually this is neat. They actually have a map of it, because I was going to say I should have brought a map up for next time we do discussion, but instead they ended up having one for us right here. I guess that's good. Never mind. But bottom line, you can see here, Nino 3.4 region. This is the area that we watch for the values that determine El Nino and La Nina conditions. And Nino 3.4, at least per the CPC, is officially at 1.6 degrees Celsius above normal. And that is actually officially in strong El Nino threshold. This one, kind of a little different, probably uses a little different methodology. This is the CDAS from Tropical Tidbits, so obviously probably a little bit of different values. But also this one is a daily updated sort of thing, not just daily, 6-hour interval updated sort of graph. So obviously is a little different than this, which is updated based on a weekly basis, but still in a decent El Nino category, 1.3, 1.6, depending on how you put it. It is still definitely a potent El Nino that is in place right now. So definitely we have that kind of for sure in the air. But this is something very interesting, and you're wondering, hey, what is this? This is the equatorial sea surface temperature anomalies in depth. So basically, what I'm trying to say here is, if you were to take this part of the region, the equatorial Pacific, slice it and look at it vertically, and take a look at the sea surface temperature anomalies in depth, and that's basically this map, as you could say, as a whole, basically in a nutshell, I guess. And this is a very interesting map too. This is something that we'll be using a lot as well throughout the off season. And what does this show is how the sea surface temperatures are below the surface, and this could really help us determine the strength of any current ENSO event, La Nina and El Nino. And right now you can see with the El Nino, we have a lot of very warm sea surface temperature anomalies near the surface. Obviously you can see that very well translated when you look at this map, but very interestingly enough, you go just a little bit below the surface and you already start to see a bunch of these blues beginning to pop up not far from the surface, and then we have this huge pool of blue out to the west. This is closer towards the western Pacific. This is 180 degrees, so this is the central Pacific right here, and then anything west of that is the western Pacific, and we have a bunch of these blue anomalies there. Very much of a pattern that you would see in an El Nino, but very interestingly enough that we're starting to see these blue anomalies beginning to pop up in the eastern Pacific, maybe meaning that our El Nino is already on our way out of here. I think I saw some people begin to mention something of this. Maybe we'll have to see. But could our El Nino already be at its peak phase or past its peak? Definitely something we'll be watching too throughout the winter, and how that fares out for next year's hurricane season. All very interesting things we'll need to watch, of course, with time. Of course, though, given that we're kind of gonna go into a period where really there isn't much to talk about in terms of tropics, why not? I always like to do this in the off season, kind of talk about weather that is going on here in the United States, and I do actually plan to do a lot more of that in specific terms to just the United States weather, and forgetting about tropics through this winter. We'll talk about that more later on, but that's something that I do plan on doing this off season, and hopefully we can get some sort of success out of it. But still gonna do it anyways to some degree. And right now, this is the CPC. This is what I'm looking at, Storm Prediction Center. And in terms of severe weather, because this is what this is for. This is the convective outlook in terms of severe weather, and luckily enough for today, not much of it. We only have some general thunderstorm risk areas for portions of Florida, and of course for the Northwest. Nothing in the way of any significant severe weather, though. That's good. Tomorrow, also the same case, only general severe thunderstorm areas for South Florida and, of course, the West Coast. And that also remains the case, not coast. Case. Sometimes kind of get mixed up in your vocabulary, but that's okay. But generally remains the case into day 3, and even we could look at day 4, all the way up to day 8. Potential too low for all 4 days or 5 days, I think, leading up from day 3 all the way up to day 8. So nothing in terms of severe weather, at least in the longer range, and even currently right now. Not a lot of things going on. Very blank and quiet map across the whole of the United States. We do have, I believe, what is this? Dense fog advisories in effect for portions of what that seems to be Montana and even North Dakota. But other than that, nothing in the way of severe weather. And of course, we always, of course, like to see that. That is it, though. We really don't have a lot to talk about. As I said, today will kind of be a little bit of a relaxing day since there isn't really much to go on. But of course, if you did like what you saw today, would always appreciate if you like, comment, subscribe, share with family and friends. Got to keep the community going, especially into the off season. And I always find it interesting that sometimes the off season is when there's the most, hype and the most talk and attention towards hurricane season. So, if you really want us to help us grow throughout the off season, that would be something to really help out with, to kind of growing our community. And that would also be a help when it comes to bringing the information throughout and during the hurricane season. Very important for that as well. But enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Enjoy your weekend. It should be nice. At least that's the way it seems like for most of us. Certainly going to be nice for me. Finally, enjoying a dry weekend here in New York City after we had a total of 8 straight weekends where there was rain. Finally, so happy finally today. I'm going to be getting some dry weather, and hopefully it is dry for where you are too. And if it is, enjoy it and take it in, spend time with your family. Anyway, that's going to do it for me today. Peace, love, and kindness to all, and we will talk again soon.